You know, we have all of this debt. You know, we have debt, predatory lending, we have debt from trying to educate ourselves so that we can get jobs. But then when we go and we get jobs, oftentimes, you know, we working full time, we still can't afford to make ends meet. I myself was working in a factory. I was working mandatory overtime, 50 hours a week during peak season, 40 hours a week during off season, but I was a seasonal hire. And this is perfectly legal that I had no benefits. And I was making $10 an hour. I know people who were working at that same place who had been doing the same thing for the past 16 years, where they're continuously rehired and fired over and over again in the hopes that they would eventually become an actual full-time employee. Though they worked the same hours as the full-time employees, who were a very small group of people, most people working in that factory were seasonal. And that's perfectly legal. I would like to put an end to that. Yeah. But it's just, that was not the first job that I've worked where I've either been kept under a certain amount of hours or been put in some bizarre, you know, employment status where my employer didn't want to pay me what my work was worth, didn't want to pay my fellow employees what their work was worth. And, you know, if you're working, you should be able to feed your kids. If you're working, you should be able to start and have a family. If you're working, you should be able to have a place to live. And that's not the case.
I just want to take a second to explain what wage theft is. The reason we use the term theft is because they are stealing from us. There's no doubt about it. Every year in this country, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars are stolen from workers who have a legal right to wages they've earned and are not getting paid them. I heard a story recently from a worker right here in Portland who showed up after doing some day labor work and didn't even get their paycheck at the end of a week's pay. I've heard stories about waiters and waitresses whose tips are being stolen by their managers and the owners of the restaurants. I've heard stories of first-hand accounts of people who put in you know, an extra 10 hours, 5 hours, whatever a week, and off the clock because that's what they have to do, they believe. That's what they have to do to compete because other people are working off the clock. Or they work overtime and instead of getting paid time and a half, their employer gives them comp hours or something. Basically, there are already laws on the books that aren't being followed. And so if you or anyone you know has ever experienced wage theft, share your story because that's the beginning of getting the word out there that this stuff is happening. The way to tackle the problem is through organizing. If the workers work together, it's not easy, it's not always successful, but it's by first banding together that if there is going to be change, that's how it happens. And there's also laws to protect what's called concerted action. So if you ever do want to confront an employer about something, talk to your coworkers first. Even just talking to other coworkers about the issue first already makes you more protected under the law.
I worked at Sam's Club a lot when I was younger to try to pay for college so I didn't have lots of debts. 16, 17, 18, and 19 when I was there. And I probably missed 15 on every shift, maybe 2 every once in a while. And there was a lot of, not even talk about it when I was there. Right before I left, I remember signing something that said, did you ever not have a 15? Somebody had been passing around. And I was like, yeah, totally. Didn't think about it. But years later, this is 4 years after, 2004, I think, I got a check in the mail from a lawsuit that was won. And so even though, like you're kind of saying that you can totally get kind of screwed around by this, but if you really do fight, whoever was fighting back, this was a national thing. They started up somewhere, and it grew from there, and it became a national thing, and everybody that said that they lost 15s throughout their thing, they went back and had to pay. And I think we do need to talk about it. I think we need to say every time we're missing any little thing, and this is happening same at Staples. I take every 15 because I know I'm supposed to get my 15. And there's people all around me who aren't. You know, I work hard when I'm working, but I want to get what I'm supposed to get for breaks. And we all should be expecting that when we work there because it's happening everywhere. And it's happened at every job I've ever been. I've been shorted time usually, or they're asking you to do extra stuff or whatever. And I think we just need to stand and make sure we're doing it and telling people why you're doing it. Your workers should know why, yeah, I'm going to take my 15 every time.
My mother had a similar experience where she was working at Wells Fargo, and there was a huge lawsuit with Wells Fargo for overtime pay, and my mom had been skimped a lot for overtime pay, working 50, 60-hour weeks and not getting paid for those last 10 or 20 hours. And the lawsuit came around, and you know, she got a large chunk of money because she's working a pretty high-end job. She's a mortgage dealer. And so, you know, when that lawsuit came through, it really made a big difference for her. And the fact that that kind of thing can happen, and I'm sure it happened from the ground up with, you know, workers organizing and figuring out a way to like make it become fair in some way. You know, probably hired a lot of lawyers, enough to fight Wells Fargo, which, you know,
Yeah.
it's a powerful thing, the solidarity.
Mhm.